We are back with Paula Boggs. She has a resume that could fill the bookshelf behind her. And she has a new album out called Janus. The song you just heard is Ebony Revisited. Tell me about the town you're describing in that song.
Sure. I'm describing the city of my birth, Washington, D.C., and Ebony Revisited is one of those songs on the album Janus, our new album. There are some songs I wrote during the pandemic. There are other songs I dusted off, reimagined, and put a new spin on them during the pandemic. And Ebony Revisited is one of those. I wrote a version of it um, many years ago and then just sort of forgot about it, never really finished it. And so during the pandemic, I was really struck by this sense of home. What is home at the end of the day? For some people, it's a place. For other people, it's the people who make a chosen family for you. That's home. And so I got I got really wrapped up in the sense of home, and that led me back to my quote hometown and memory sparks about that earlier time when I first started writing it, which was living temporarily when I was living temporarily in Washington D.C. as a young adult. And here it is, my hometown. Uh, my mom moved to DC when she was 3 years old. My grandparents had lived much of their adult life there and whatnot. As part of the Great Migration, they had come to DC from Georgia, and here I was, but I didn't know the town, and it didn't feel like home, even though it was technically home. And from that I surmise there are probably a lot of people for whom that is the case. You're born someplace, and for whatever reason, your connection with that birthplace is is strained or indeed non-existent. And so that those thoughts animated my writing of of that song.
So you wound up moving, I guess, to Seattle, or is that later in life?
That was later. It's far more convoluted than that. I don't think you have time on your show, Trevor, for all the ins and takes of that. But suffice it to say, I left Washington D.C. You know, as a 4 year old, as I say in the song, and I really didn't come back until I was in my 20s, and it was for a very short period of time.
So how do you think your life would have been different if you stayed in in that in that birthplace instead of, I guess, where did you wind up moving to?
Well, I mean, we lived in the segregated South, Virginia, for uh, a number of years. For me, I guess age 4 through 13, and then my my mom moved herself and her 4 kids to Europe, and so that's where I was from age 13 to 18 before returning to the United States. But my family was still in Europe, and I think the biggest uh, differences are, one, by leaving the United States. I mean, not just leaving DC, but leaving the United States at an impressionable age and being exposed to a variety of cultures I would not have had I stayed in DC. Namely, my mom was a teacher for the children of military personnel in Germany and Italy. And so we were exposed to the military, which was a new culture for us. We were in European countries, Germany and Italy, and exposed to those cultures. Um, that led me to being exposed to different kinds of music, and really altered the course of my life. And so, I mean, the ways in which my life is different, I think, those ways are legion. Uh, had I stayed in Washington D.C., I think I would be um, a very different person than who I became.
So part of becoming such an accomplished American involved leaving America.
Yes, absolutely.
So, oh, that's a very, very unique background. But, I mean, it certainly pushed you to quite a place. You were advising uh, the White House on arts and humanities for a president who I truly admire. And then a man who I maybe don't admire so much came into office, and you left your post.
I
Uh,
did.
Tell me about that badass decision.
It was an amazing turn of events. I was on President Obama's presidential committee for the arts and humanities, and I was uh, a member along with a number of great people, and so as the Obama administration was winding down, there there were a couple of uh, pet projects uh, that the committee cared deeply about, and one of them was Turnaround Arts, which was a program that basically um, married, celebrities like, Red Hot Chili Peppers, drummer, and, to schools in underserved communities throughout the United States. And these these partnerships were leading to a number of wonderful outcomes. Kids' reading scores were improving, attendance rates, a lot of really great outcomes. And so the the commission really did not want to lose the momentum of turnaround in arts, and A, and B, wanted to move it to a safe place so that as the Obama administration ended and the Trump administration began, this wonderful program would survive, because it was surrounded by uncertainty what President Trump and his administration would do as it relates to this program. And so the plan was to move Turnaround Arts from the White House to the Kennedy Center. And that, in fact, ultimately happened. But many of us were asked to stay on as holdovers to try to shepherd that outcome as best we could. So to stay, not resign, stay on the commission until our replacements were appointed. So some of us didn't. We said, no way, we're leaving, but some of us did. And I was one of the ones who agreed to stay. And you might recall, Trevor, during the, the early months of the Trump administration, um, there was a lot of effort to basically kill the arts, whether it was the National Endowment of the Arts or whatever. And so one of the things we were also trying to do was, by staying in those positions, be a voice, you know, testifying, yeah, on the Hill or whatever we could do to be helpful to preserve the arts. So that's what we were doing, and that was kind of what we were doing when Charlottesville happened, and uh, the new president, uh, compared white supremacists to the people who were fighting the white supremacists, saying there were good people on both sides. That was the straw. And so one of our members, the actor Cal Penn, actor comedian Cal Penn, said, "I am so out of here. I can't stay another minute. I'm quitting." And the rest of us said, "Whoa, you're not going to quit by yourself." And so uh, with that, over really a 48-hour period, these, you know, 17 highly opinionated people, those of us who were still there, um, worked on a letter. We discussed whether we should force him to fire us or whether we should quit en masse. And if we were quitting en masse, what the letter should say. I am so amazed how quickly uh, the 17 of us came to consensus on what that letter should say, and that we would resign en masse, and we did. And so Cal Penn, took the first stab of drafting a letter. Uh, all of us had an opportunity for input, and then we did it.
Oh, it's a pretty cool thing you did. Someone had to stand up to him, and this transformation of America into a darker place is going to happen, if not for a lot of people, doing what they can to stand up, and several have. So, it's
Absolutely.
the last song I wanted to touch on is Shadow of Old Glory, um, telling truly heartbreaking stories. Um, as someone who has invested so much of themselves into improving this country, what does it feel like to, I guess, see that these mass shootings that take place are, to paraphrase a different former president I wasn't so crazy about, uniquely American?
Yeah. Um, it's interesting, Trevor, because Shadow of Old Glory is not the first song I've written that um, that reflects a mass a mass shooting. In fact, it's the third song. The first song I wrote is a song um, called "Carnival of Miracles." It was the title song of our second album, and the triggering event, literally and figuratively, was the Newtown, Connecticut mass shooting that led to the deaths of the first graders and their teachers um, in 2014. The um, the second, or I wrote the song in 2014. Um, the second was relating to the massacre visited on Mother Emanuel Church in Charlottesville, or in Charlotte, in Charleston, South Carolina. Uh, and that song, Benediction, appeared on our 2017 album, Elixir, the Soulgrass Sessions. Shadow of Old Glory um, was the result of my response to the synagogue massacre in Pittsburgh that happened at the beginning of one week. And then before the week had ended, there had been this mass shooting in Kentucky that had led to the deaths of black shoppers at a Kroger's. What really, even more so than the shootings themselves, that struck me and led to me writing the song was too often in our country, um, black people and Jewish people are at odds. Uh, we're talking past each other. We're not in harmony, and yet here we were in one week. These heinous events had terrorized both communities in eerily the same way. And so it just struck me, this is an example of we're more alike than we are different. And I'm going to write a song about that. And so Shadow of Old Glory, yes, it depicts horrific events. But it was important for me to end that song with a feeling of hope. And so the music you hear at the end of that song by design was meant to be spiritual, uplifting, hopeful, to take you on a journey through music. And I I I note that we've played this song live now, and every single time we do, people come up to me and us afterwards and say that song because it people feel it. They feel what that is at the end of that song, and you don't have to be Jewish or black to feel what that is at the end of the song. It's musical empathy.
It is it is a powerful song. It is a powerful album. Um, all in all, what do you feel about your American identity today?
That is a wonderful question, Trevor, and I think um, I can answer it a couple different ways. On the one hand, there are very few people more American than me. And so when when some will say, "Well, go back to where you came from," my response to that is, "No, you go back to where you came from because I've been here longer. My people have been here longer, right?" And so there, that's part of it. Um, a second part of it is it has really struck me that even though the overarching narrative about America is that we are a nation of immigrants, that's not true. We are a nation mostly of immigrants, but there are these two other groups that, but for their existence, America wouldn't be America. And those other legs of the stool are the indigenous, our indigenous people who were here before the first immigrants arrived. And then the third leg of that stool are my people, uh, the those who were brought here against their will, enslaved, considered less than human, and their progeny. And it is those three legs of that stool that make America America. And I guess, I just had this realization recently. It was like, wait a minute, my people were indigenous. They were indigenous, um, but they were wrested from their place of home and brought here, right? And so it even has reshaped how I think of even the word indigenous, right? Um, but at the end of the day, um, this is my home. I was as an army veteran, I was willing to die for this country, despite its imperfections, right? And so um, all of those things, I think, inform how I view myself and my place in America. And I guess so the net of it is I don't think there's anyone more American than me.
The most American woman, Paula Boggs. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I really hope that your vision of hope is what comes to be.
Thank you, Trevor. And given you're in Long Island, I want to make sure I give a shout out that the band is coming to Rockwood Music Hall in New York City on August 17th.
That is awesome. Paula Boggs, thanks so much for coming on.
Take care. Bye bye.